morning. I'm Helen Christensen. I will be your MC this morning. This morning, we will continue to be in the hybrid mode with some of our attendees meeting in person at Friendly House and others joining us virtually on Zoom. The Humanists of Greater Portland is a chapter of the American Humanists Association. Humanism is an outlook or system of thought attaching primary importance to human rather than supernatural matters. Humanists believe in the worth and goodness of all human beings. Humanists seek to find common values and respect among people. Humanists seek rational ways to solve problems in their local communities, as well as worldwide issues by listening to others and speaking their own truth, and then finding equitable solutions through science, reason, and free inquiry. Our topic at today's meeting, the Bybee Lake Hope Center and the Helping Hands program that has celebrated 20 years of providing resources, recovery, and reentry in Oregon, and has created a best practice model for people experiencing homelessness. This program today especially addresses the humanist commitments of social justice, service, and participation. HGP is an all-volunteer program that believes strongly in freedom of speech. Sue Pierce will be doing our reading this morning. Come on in, Sue.
This is actually a Methodist hymn that I remember from my childhood that was written initially in, I think, 1847 in opposition to the Mexican-American War, and then was later used by abolitionists in opposition to slavery. And I think that once again, it's relevant. I apologize to avowed humanists about the references to God, but I'm hoping that you'll follow the general premise here, which seems so timely. Here we go. Once to every man and nation comes the moment to decide, in the strife of truth with falsehood, for the good or evil side. Some great cause, God's new Messiah, offering each the bloom or blight, and the choice goes by forever, twixt that darkness and that light. Then to side with truth is noble, when we share her wretched crust, ere her cause bring fame and profit, and his prosperous to be just. Then it is the brave man chooses, while the coward stands aside, till the multitude make virtue of the faith they had denied. By the light of burning martyrs, Christ, thy bleeding feet we track, toiling up new Calvaries ever, with the cross that turns not back. This is my favorite line. New occasions teach new duties. Time makes ancient good uncouth. They must upward still and onward, who would keep abreast of truth. Though the cause of evil prosper, yet 'tis truth alone is strong. Though her portion be the scaffold, and upon the throne be wrong, yet that scaffold sways the future, and behind the dim unknown standeth God within the shadow, keeping watch above his own. Again, once to every man and nation comes the moment to decide.
I now would like to introduce today's speaker. Alan Evans is the founder and CEO of Helping Hands Reentry Outreach Center. Mr. Alan Evans turned his life of lived experience into an opportunity to serve those still experiencing homelessness and addiction in Oregon. Welcome, Alan. And we're going to be seeing a short video to start to kind of introduce this program, and then Alan will come on.
I fell into the abyss of hell quickly, praying for death.
I was a raging alcoholic for the majority of my life. Things spiraled out of control and I ended up losing my two boys. The more that we can help people change their life from the toughest places that they come from, where they hurt the most, why they hide, then we can give them a true foundation to change their life.
I don't know how they saw it or what they saw, but they believed in me.
Longer-term homeless reentry doesn't exist. When I started the organization, I knew that that was the missing link. And I was homeless from the age of 13 years old. And I was an abused kid. I lived through trauma, and every place I'd go, they would tell me that they could offer me just one thing out of everything I needed. What makes this different is you walk in the door and receive the services you need and the opportunity to change your life under one roof in one location. The organization internally is ran by people with lived experience.
There are people there to help you process your day in the real world. How was your day? How'd you feel? What can we do different?
They really genuinely try to get to know you and what will work for you to succeed.
We make all decisions for every single person we want to assist based off of the data we collect from them when they come through the door. One, we can see what people need to do to change, and two, we can provide the best service that we possibly can. And then we can really truly gather depth and information to make good business decisions for our organization to provide the best service possible to serve a person.
There's a credibility there that resonated with me and others. I think they're taking the best of street smarts and the high-tech world we're in and combining those so they can tailor different kinds of approaches and treatments that are science and fact-based. The 88% success rate. That means one more life that doesn't want to be on the street has a chance to become a fulfilled human being again.
My main hope is to provide a consistent home for my children. It reminds me that miracles are possible.
If you were to build the perfect building for our program, that would be it. Medical facilities, vocational training, education, all of the room to bring all of the services in one location. We have a system in place, a data-driven, trauma-informed, best practice model for homeless reentry that is going not only to work here, but allow us to expand that model. Every person coming through our door wasn't born homeless. They had opportunities, and somewhere along the line, they've lost that. To watch somebody transform, it all starts out with loving people until they love themselves.
Alan, this is going to be quite a pleasure to hear your story and to hear about these centers. So welcome, and please tell us all about yourself and your program.
Well, perfect. Thanks for having me today. And I always love talking to groups of people and sharing my story and the organization's story. I'm Alan Evans. I'm the founder and executive director of Helping Hands Reentry Outreach Centers. We've got 12 facilities in 5 Oregon counties, including Multnomah County. And we house about 650 people a night. With our new expansions, we'll be housing over 650 people a night in the next 30 days. We've opened up 318 beds in the Portland metro area in the last year, which is a lot of beds for people experiencing homelessness. But I'm going to tell you a little bit of my story and who I am and where I come from. I'm not your average CEO. I have a tremendous amount of lived experience, but I want to give you a perspective of the way we look at people today in general, and what people are going through sometimes are not the same thing as we believe we see. A little bit about me. I was born in California. I had two addictive parents that were both addicted and suffered from drug addiction and alcohol. My father was an extremely violent man. I was put in the hospital multiple times before I was 9 years old. I was hung by my father when I was 11 years old, and I was found by a neighbor, and I was put into a boys' home after I was found, and spent a little bit of time in the hospital, and I was put into a boys' home in Kern, California. There was about 8 of us boys there, all lived some very traumatic and troubling lives at that time. I had a lot of questions internally. I didn't understand why I wasn't loved. I didn't understand why I wasn't cared for or taken care of. There were just lots of stuff that was going through my mind, and I was extremely, extremely angry and defiant because of that. I started drug abuse at a very early age. I was a full-blown methamphetamine addict by the time I was 13 years old. I was running away constantly, and I got to the point where they just stopped looking for me. And from 13 years old, the 2 times I ran away, one was for about 5 weeks, and then I got caught, and then I got brought back, and then the second time was even longer than that. And after that, they just decided that it was best that they just kind of let me go. I did everything I could to stay high. In a weird sort of way, drug abuse saved my life, because if I was not high, I was stuck with what was going on between my ears, and it was a very uncomfortable place to be. And because in one sense I was trying not to feel, and in another sense I was afraid to feel. I started my homelessness in Victorville, California, where I slept in a dugout at Parkview Elementary School for just about over a year. I would steal anything I could get my hands on. I would do anything I could to stay addicted. And that's where my life led. I ended up leaving Victorville, California, and hitchhiking to Las Cruces, New Mexico when I was 15 years old. I was homeless there for about 8 months. I went from Las Cruces, New Mexico to El Paso, which wasn't that far, El Paso to San Antonio to Pensacola, Florida, Fort Walton Beach, Destin, Florida, from there to Virginia, from Virginia to New York, from New York to Chicago, from Chicago to Grand Rapids, Michigan, into Indiana, and across the United States into Seattle, where by that time it was several years. I'd stay in each place as long as I could until I figured that other people would see me the same way that I saw myself. The closer that people got to me, the more broken I was. You know, the one thing historically that I realized in that situation, and I want to tell you too, I've overdosed 11 times in my life, clinically dead 4 times, brought back. I couldn't understand why they would bring me back, but they did. And the one thing that I didn't understand that historically around the United States was I could go to a door and say, I need help, please help me. And what people seen on the outside of me and what was actually going on the inside of me were 2 different things. People would tell me, if you just quit using drugs, your life would change. And what I couldn't get them to understand, that if I just quit using drugs, I want to die on the inside. I had so many unanswered questions and lived through so much trauma in my life that that's how I felt. And I could only go to a door and receive one thing. I could get shelter, I could get treatment, I could get a meal, I could get these things, but I had so many other things going on in my life that I needed to get past or needed help with to become a sustainable human being. I left Seattle, went down to Las Vegas, was homeless in Las Vegas for about 3 years. Left Vegas, went back to Victorville for a little bit, and then ended up coming to Tacoma, Washington. And from Tacoma, I ended up just about 21 years ago. I ended up under the Burnside Bridge in Portland. And I had the second coldest day I've ever experienced in my life at that time. It was a really, 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 really bad ice storm. And I was afraid to fall asleep because I was afraid I was going to freeze to death. I remember you could go over and you can get clothing from one location under Burnside Bridge to stay warm. You could turn your wet clothes in and then you could get some other clothes. And the gift that gave me the most comfort was a man who gave me a little brown tarp, because it had a tendency of keeping the heat in and keeping the wet off of you. And I decided that I didn't want to die, and I was afraid of it. So I talked to two guys that were living in our camp at that time and said, you know, why don't we go to the beach? Why don't we go to Seaside? I mean, if we're going to be homeless in Oregon, why not be homeless on the beach? And that's what we did. We went to one location. They had this program in place that they will give you a bus ticket to anywhere you wanted to go at that time, just to get you off the street or out of town. And we did. The three of us took a bus up to Seaside, Oregon, where it wasn't much warmer at that time of year. I just want to let you know that it still gets cold on the coast. As a matter of fact, that year, it was December 27th, and we ended up with like 3 or 4 inches of snow on the ground over here. We decided to split because there was no camps over here and on the coast at that time. You just kind of, if you were grouped up with people, then you'd get kind of, I don't want to say harassed, but you got to go kind of deal. So I ended up dragging my stuff to Gearhart, and I ended up finding this bundle of trees on the side of the road that I could set my camp up in. And that's what I did. I stayed there for a couple days, and I was by this bank of mailboxes that a road came out on, and these people pulled up in this van, and I hear them talking about who was going to check their mail while they were gone, because it was during the methamphetamine epidemic that we were having. And I realized when they left, they had their bags and stuff in their little van. They pulled out on the highway. And so I sat there for a little bit, and I remember looking behind me in the bushes, and there was this big, beautiful home back there. And I'm thinking, well, they're leaving. I'm freezing. I'll break into this house. So about 2.5 hours, I waited. I was freezing cold. I went around behind the garage of the house and I kicked the door in, and ended up in this garage where I rummaged through everything I could find to see what I could steal, what I could sell, whatever it is I could do. And I found a 22 pistol in the glove box of a Toyota pickup truck. And I remember grabbing this bucket and flipping it upside down in the garage. And then in between the garage and the house was a laundry room, and on it there was a phone hanging on the wall. It was a cordless phone, but it was hanging on the wall there. And I remember grabbing that telephone, sitting down on the bucket, and I look at this telephone, and I realized that I was 38 years old and I had nobody to call. Nobody to call. I didn't even know where to begin. And I stuck this gun in my mouth, and I still remember the little string of spit that went from my mouth to the barrel of the gun, because I was crying so hard and everything in me wanted to die. But a little tiny piece of me wanted to live. It was an awakening for me. As a matter of fact, the only thing that saved my life was, I remember this. When I was in the boys' home in Inyokern, California, we'd go down to this little pool hall down the street where they take all the kids and kind of let us do whatever it is we wanted to do and have fun. And in this room, there was these doors that came into where the pool tables and ping pong tables were. And this woman come out of a door, and she came by, and she had these little tiny pieces of paper that had a paragraph on them. And she said, I'll tell you what, if you learn this, if you memorize this, I'll give you 50 cents. And I remember taking that back to that boys' home that night. And I read it over and over and over and over to the point that I memorized it. And I went back the next day and I read that to her. And and I got my 50 cents, and I still remember to this day what I got. I bought a Chico stick and some Abba Zaba and some grape bubble gum. Well, you fast forward that 26 years later, I'm standing in a garage or sitting in a garage on a bucket. And I had this gun in my mouth, and I remember this little paragraph that was written on a piece of paper that saved my life. And now I'm not a religious man, but it was John 3:16. And I still remember it. For God so loved the world, he sent his only begotten son. Whosoever shall believeth in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. And I remember for the first time in my life, I got on my knees and I said, I don't know if you're real, but if you are, I don't want to live this way no more. And instantly, I laid down in the garage of that place, and I went to sleep. I woke up the next morning, walked out the garage door in the back. I walked from Gearhart, Oregon, all the way to Astoria, and I knocked on every door I could find and said, look, I'm broke, I'm homeless, I'm addicted, I don't want to live this way no more. Please help me, please help me. I tried to get food stamps. They told me I needed identification. I tried to get identification. They told me I needed a residence. Whoops. So I went to every door I could find. I tried to get food stamps. They told me I needed identification. I tried to get identification. They told me I needed a residence. I wanted a residence, but I had no money. And I couldn't for the life of me understand that there's no access to nothing, or what it is they tell you. So I remember, and I realized at that time that I could commit a crime and continue the lifestyle I was living from self-medication, which is the easiest way to feel better. But if I got arrested, I'd get 3 meals in bed in jail. Like getting arrested became getting rescued. And for the life of me, I couldn't understand why a society or why in communities that we make access to getting help to change your life so difficult that crime becomes a win-win situation. So I ended up walking all the way back to this house. I went back through the garage door that I kicked open, and there was a door which I never entered before then that went from the laundry room in the garage into the house. And I went in the house and I started rummaging through everything that I could find in there. And I found a box of checks that were sitting on the desk. They were printable. And I went on to this computer and I wrote a check to myself for $450. I cut it out with a pair of scissors. And I took that and my broken down Social Security card, and I went to the Safeway in Seaside, which there was a First Interstate Bank in there, and I passed it over the counter, and the lady looked, and I stunk so bad. And this lady looked at me and she goes, really? You don't have ID? I said, I don't have a Social Security card. Is this check even real? She says, and I said, yeah, it's real. And that's who I am. So she called the police. And the police came in and arrested me from the First Interstate Bank in Seaside, Oregon. And this police officer, who was the head of narcotics for Clatsop County at the time, Sergeant Mark Whistler, came in and sat down and he said to me, he said, tell me your story. And so from beginning to end, I told him my story. I told him of the abuse, the sexual abuse as a child, the physical abuse, all of the things. And he said to me, he says, you're not a bad guy. You're just sick. You're broken. Him and 3 other police officers wrapped services around me. They got me into a small home in Seaside. They would visit me every day. They would make sure that I was connected to the resources that I needed to change my life. I got clean and sober. I went to meetings. I got a job. I got a driver's license. I got identification. I got a pickup truck. And I went to work every single day. And the whole time I was saving a little bit of money. And I went back to him and I said, I got an idea. I said, I want to start a program. And I want to start a program where people could come in the door and they could change their life if we just heard them. And I remember they looked at me a little crazy because I said, I want to call it Thugs Off Drugs. And so they laughed a little bit, but they said, okay, if you've got this idea and you look at this problem differently, we're on your team. And so me and 4 police officers and 3 recovering addicts started a program 20 years ago this year in Seaside, Oregon called Thugs Off Drugs. And we went to the city after we got our nonprofit status, and they gave us $1,000 of seed money. And we opened up a building right on the highway in Seaside, Oregon. And when we opened our doors, people started to flock to it. It was unbelievable. I mean, people were just showing up. And I really realized then how many people truly want an opportunity to change their life, because the one thing I remember most of being in camps all over the United States is that I never met one person who said, I want to be homeless. I never met one person who said, I want to be addicted. I never met one person who said, I want to be a victim. That everybody, when they closed their eyes, wanted to be something different. We started our program in Seaside, Oregon with one small home and a little tiny clubhouse. And within 30 days, it filled up. 6 months later, we were housing 67 men, women, and children. Everybody with addiction and mental health issues. We started to concentrate specifically on offender reentry, people that were getting out of jail or getting out of prison, or people who didn't want to go to jail and didn't want to go to prison and wanted an opportunity. You had to stay clean and sober. You paid a small fee for your bed space in the facility. Channel 2 News came in and did a story on me and about a 5-minute segment, and that went viral nationally. We got a call from Yamhill County. They asked if we would come and bring a program to Yamhill County, which we have 5 facilities in Yamhill County now. Then Lincoln County came to us and said, will you bring your program to Lincoln County? And we said, yes, we will. And we expanded into Lincoln County, and pretty soon, about 4 years later, we were housing about 200 people in 3 Oregon counties. About 2009, we said, and the other thing we didn't understand at that time was how come people would come to our door. And back then you can get an apartment or you can get evicted from an apartment, but you can go down the street and get another apartment. That's how plentiful housing was in those days. It was nothing like it is today. And, but we couldn't figure out for the life of us how come people would come in. They stay with us about 6 months to get on their feet, to get a job. They go out and save enough money to get their own apartment. 6 months later, they were back at our door needing assistance because they didn't have the tools capable of housing, of sustainability. They just didn't have those tools. And about 2009, we started to see a dramatic change in the face of the homeless. There was a crash in the market. Pretty soon, affordable housing prices got a little bit more expensive than people were capable of affording. Based on how much money they were making. Senior citizens started showing up at our doors, and mothers with children who never done drugs in their life started showing up at our doors, and we could not for the life of us understand what was happening. There were a couple of things that were happening at that time. One is, if a senior shows up at our door, and we have a program called Thugs Off Drugs, we work specifically with knuckleheads. They didn't feel like they qualified to be there. Well, just about that same time, I was trying to become a foster parent in the state of Oregon, so I could foster children who've lived through things that I lived through when I was a kid. I became the first foster parent in the state of Oregon with a criminal history. I became the first adoptive parent in the state of Oregon with 27 years of homelessness under their belt. But I really wanted to help change the life of other people. So I adopted a boy named Eli. When Eli was when he came to us, he was in the 3rd grade. Never went to school a day in his life, lived in a tent on the beach. And so when I took him, I just really didn't know what to do. So I took him to Gearhart Elementary School, and they did an IEP on him. I'm not sure if some of you know what an IEP is and some of you don't, but an IEP is an individual education plan. You see, they evaluated the obstacles that Eli faced to read and write at grade level. And sitting around this table was a person that could help him read, a person that could help him write, a person that could help him with mental health issues, a tutor, a counselor, extra support. There were 7 people sitting around this table. And I had this epiphany. If Eli would have had to go down the street to learn to read, and then down the street to learn to write, down the street to get help with mental health issues, down the street for a tutor, down the street for a counselor, all in different locations, this kid never would have been successful. He graduated 4 years ago. He's buying a home. He's an outstanding human being, but that process that the school district put together for him to give him an individual education plan based off of what they learned from him sitting around this table was a game changer for him in his life. And at the same time, they did an ACEs survey on Eli. I'm not sure if you guys know what an ACEs survey is, but it's Adverse Childhood Experiences. It's a series of 10 questions that can gauge how much trauma a child has lived through in their life and how they can better support major change in the lives of our kids or our adults by learning how much trauma that they've been through and bringing healing opportunities to the table at the same time as they're bringing his individual education plan. And while they're reading him these 10 questions, while we're sitting at the table, he rates a 6. And I'm doing the questions in my head, and I rate a 9. And which is a lot of trauma. So we took both of those concepts from that room that day, and I went back and sat my team back down and said, listen, I think we need to do this differently. I think we need to start doing an evaluation of every single person who comes through our door, ask a series of about 70 questions to learn about their basic demographics, their needs, and the obstacles they face to reenter society. Do an ACEs survey on everybody who comes in our door and see if we can't tailor programs that allow us to get the information from a person coming in the door and build individual reentry plans for each person based off of the information they give us when they come through the door. And then 2 is we had to change our name because I'll give you a little insight. If you are an old knucklehead drug addict and you run a program called Thugs Off Drugs, people do not trust you with their money. Raising funds had its set of challenges, and it's impossible to house people that have no money with no money. That was one of the biggest obstacles that we had to face. So we decided we were going to go back to the drawing board. And so we changed our name to Helping Hands based off of what we were learning about people coming through the door. Helping Hands Reentry Outreach Centers. Excuse me. When we started doing all of this on paper, and we would do an evaluation of a person when they came through the door, we'd fill it out all by hand. We would take that, we'd scan it into a computer on a scanner. We'd take that information, and we had this program called LogMeIn, where our district office in here had one computer sitting in the middle of it, and there were folders in each one of in the computer. One was our Yamhill County facility, one was our Lincoln County facility, and then if you open up that folder, each person's file was scanned into this. And we started to see this dramatic change in people when we began to invest in them and we began to hear them. And I just thought we were the cat's meow. We were getting this thing figured out. And all of a sudden I get this Facebook message from this guy, and he says, hey, I'm your brother Wayne. And well, when I was hung by my dad when I was 11 years old, my mother and my little brother Wayne escaped the violent situation when I was separated. And he said, would you be interested in meeting? And I said, absolutely. I mean, internally, I kind of touched base with him a few times over the years when I was homeless, but I was a pretty jealous guy that my brother got saved and I didn't. So we agreed to meet, and we ended up going to Maupin, Oregon, and meeting in Maupin. He was from Washington. And when we first sat down, I was telling him about all the work that we were doing and how we were making these changes, and we were doing these IRPs, these individual reentry plans. And I pulled up my tablet and I pulled up our computer at the office through LogMeIn and said, here's the little folders and everything else. And he said, do you know what I do? And I said, I don't. He said, I work for Dell. I run the data control centers. We create databases that track things for shopping networks like Amazon, eBay, what's hot, what's not, what sells, what doesn't sell. And I said, what are the chances of putting me in a room with your team to see if we can build a database that would allow us to gather all the information from people coming through the door and physically see it, that a movable piece. And so a week later, I was talking with people all over the world, and him and his team got together and we went live with our system called Tactical Demographics, just about 8 years ago now. And we had no idea that we were going to gather data the way we were going to gather it. I mean, when we started to invest in each person coming through a door, put that series of 70 questions in there, and then you can learn about stackable data. You can learn about if you've got a victim of domestic violence that's been to prison, that is a veteran, that has mental health issues. When you look at a person's life in this data model, you can start to see that there's these little ways to help people navigate through their own reentry plan. And we went live with our system. Not only we were going to gather information for individual reentry plans, but we also didn't realize we were going to get to pull the data that we were pulling. And I'll give you an example. 33% of people come through our door have a mental illness, been diagnosed with a mental illness, and less than 4% of those people are being treated in our communities today. 56% of the people who come through our door have drug or alcohol issues, and the average number of time they've been to treatment is 5. 17% of people come through our door do not have health insurance because they can't connect to health insurance because the provider can't find them when they have no address. You see, we started pulling this data that was showing how fragmented the services in our communities are because they're so siloed because of funding streams. We started to take that data and go places with it and start to share with communities the difference in the way the data is collected through an HMIS program, homeless management information system, which is a way to gauge need in communities and see how bad things are. And then money gets released from the feds, gets released to the state, and comes into our state and gets spent the exact same way it always has for years and years and years, which means that if we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars a year to solve a problem that gets 15% worse a year in chronic homelessness, that by far is the definition of insanity, doing the same thing we've always done, expecting a different result. We started to learn a whole lot about the importance of data and how it changes everything for us. So we started to see immediate success in people when they felt invested in and they felt like they played a role in their own recovery and their own reentry plan. And all of a sudden, we've seen the recidivism rate go from 40% or 50% plus that would recidivate back to our door down to less than 10% in long terms. Because if you set a reentry plan up the right way that's data-driven and trauma-informed, then you can begin to allow and help people heal based on their own stuff. So we ended up at that point getting a call from Tillamook County asking if we would bring our program over there. We bought the Naval Command Center in Tillamook, right next to the Air Museum, where the radio room that ran the blimps were in. They were going to tear this building down. We bought it for $400,000. With our expansion, it's going to house 69 people now. And we bought a finished boarding house in Astoria, Oregon, called Uniontown. 1896 finished boarding house. It was sitting empty. We revamped that building, and it houses over 60 people now. And then I get this call from Senator Betsy Johnson, who's been a huge supporter of our program for close to 20 years. And she says, I got this guy tearing this building down in Portland. It's an old Wapato jail. He purchased the building. He's tried to get organizations to run homeless shelters out of there, and he couldn't do anything. And I said, well, she said, would you be interested in the kitchen equipment? And I said, well, sure. We've got some commercial kitchens with culinary arts programs in them, and free kitchen equipment is always good for me, especially if it's brand new and it's never been used. And so she says, why don't you go down and take a look at it? I made an appointment with the property manager at the time. My daughter and I jumped in the car. We drove past about 500 homeless people to drive into the parking lot of this 155,000 square foot building that was capable of housing close to 500 people. And I couldn't for the life of me understand why that building's sitting there empty, and they have this problem that I just drove past walking down the street. Well, and so I asked the lady who was showing us, one is we went to the kitchen, and the county at the time stripped all of the kitchen equipment out except for this 25-foot long dishwasher. And what I realized is that my kitchens are only 20-foot long, and a 25-foot long dishwasher wasn't going to work for us. So I asked them, I said, how come that problem's out there and this is here? And she said, I learned a little history of the building. The building was built with $58 million of bond money. It had 58 million total in it with the bond money. And then when they were just finishing the building up, they realized they didn't have the money to run it. And so the county spent over another $33 million, leaving it empty for 18 years, nearly $100 million piece of property. And they tried to put homeless shelters there. They weren't capable of doing it. And they sold it to Marty Kehoe for $5 million. Then Jordan came and met with Marty Kehoe and got it, because Jordan's mission was he could not understand the same thing I couldn't understand. How come this building is sitting there empty and this problem's out there? So he opened it up to nonprofits because he wanted to see a homeless program in this building. Multiple organizations tried in the Portland metro area. As a matter of fact, several people came to the table with proposals and everything else. But at the end of the day, there was always some sort of tie to government money or local government money that prevented it from being possible in that location. So I heard all of this and said, okay, all right, none of my business. Kitchen equipment wasn't going to work. My daughter and I get back in the car. My daughter's going, Dad, this is what you do. Why don't you see if you can do something here? I said, honey, this is way bigger than we'll ever be able to figure out. And this isn't our issue over here. We serve 4 Oregon counties. They're all coastal and intercoastal. And so we went back, and a couple months go by, and I'm speaking at an event called Iron Chef Goes Coastal. It's a fundraiser that United Way puts on in Clatsop County to raise money for nonprofits. And I'm a keynote speaker at this event. And they have this cooking competition where they bring in these celebrity chefs. And so Jordan Schnitzer and Senator Betsy Johnson were celebrity judges at this event. And Betsy comes over to me and says, hey, would you be interested in meeting this guy who wanted to give you that kitchen equipment? And I thought to myself, well, he's a billionaire and I'm a fundraiser. Yeah, I want to meet him. So I went over, I remember looking at him, I went over and I shook his hand. I put my hand out, shook his hand. He said, tell me your story. And so for the next 20 minutes, I sat down at a table. It was almost like the voices in the room kind of went away. and just him and I were having this conversation. He said, he was just kind of taken back by our story, who it is, who we were, what we do. He said, if I give you this building and $1 million, do you think you can make it work? And to be honest with you, I had no idea. You know, I said, you know, the first thing we'd have to do was we would have to do basically an IEP on this location, find out what obstacles we would face to be able to open a shelter in our facility, in that facility. But I stewed on it a little bit overnight. And the next day I was having a staff meeting with my staff, and Jordan calls while I'm there, and he says, I'm getting ready to sign this demolition contract. I got people sitting in my office right now. I'll put this off for a few days if you'll come over and have a conversation with me. And I said, okay, I'll do that. I went down to his office with Betsy Johnson and sat down, and he said, I'll tell you what, we found out a couple of things. We evaluated that the building was zoned industrial, and we could not house people there. But we were working on some House Bill stuff at the state, House Bill 2006, which we can get past the zoning issues. It had transportation issues. We've got those figured out. And so I went back to him and I said, okay, I'm interested. What else would you like from us? He said, if you go get an advisory group of people together in the Portland metro area and you raise $3 million, we'll make this deal work. And we raised $3 million in 3 weeks. And we went back to him, we signed a piece of paper on the building, and we started our I Believe in Hope campaign just over 2 years ago. And we got contractors in the building to do a $4.5 million remodel on this building to make it more of a home and take that institutional look out of the inside. And we opened up 126 beds right off the back in the third of the building for men, women, children, and families. And all of a sudden, as we started this progress, the pandemic started and our community got shut down. And so while we had 126 beds, we were only able to utilize about 50 of those beds at that time while we continued our remodel. Some of our donations that came in that were dedicated to us kind of got put on halt because these business owners were worried about the longevity of the businesses in their communities. And so we did construction for 10.5 months and had to stop doing construction on the building. We then got $2 million from the state to finish the navigation centerpiece. We got $1.2 million from United Way, Columbia Willamette. We were able to finish all of the project up. And now we have 318 beds open and 155,000 square feet. We've got a full medical wing with a dental wing inside. Daycare is breaking ground with our partnership with YMCA right now for families. We're putting in a 38-bay dog kennel, 22 by 80-foot long dog kennel with a veterinary station on it. We have a 3.5-acre victory garden with walking meadows, exercise paths. We're putting in raised beds for the ADA. We have 126 fruit-bearing trees there. We've got 10,000 square foot of educational space. And now every person who comes through that door, we do a full evaluation. We get all of that information into our system, and we can find out what classes, financial readiness, how to make a resume, relapse prevention, treatment programs, everything else. Now you walk into the door of this place, 318 beds for men, women, and children and families. We have a rainbow dorm for the LGBTQ plus community. And you walk in the door, you get emergency shelter, which is low barrier. You get cleaned up, you get a haircut, you get a meal, you get a full medical evaluation, you get your teeth looked at for a full dental evaluation. If you're a family, you get free daycare so you can work a job, and we can learn a little bit more about the children there. We've got a full, unbelievable kitchen in this facility that is fully up and running now. culinary arts training. We're working with different places for vocational training opportunities with certificates, the Restaurant and Lodging Association. The building is stunning. And that's who we are. Look, I might be 5 minutes early, David. But you've got the long version of the story, but here's the truth of the matter. The truth of the matter is we need to look at this problem from the bottom up, not the top down. And I always ask this, and some people say, and I'll get right to you, Gail. If you walked into a restaurant, to understand trauma-informed care, I always use this analogy. If you walked into a restaurant and your waitress treated you horribly, I mean, she stuck her thumb in your coffee, she threw it down, she was rude, she had all these things going on, how much would you tip her? Right? And so some people, a lot of people say, I wouldn't tip her a thing. I'd be very upset. But if you rewound that situation and you went to this restaurant, and the manager stopped you at the door and said, please excuse your waitress. Her husband died yesterday. How much would you tip her? You see, we look at the problem. We don't look at the depth. We don't look past the action that we're seeing today and on our streets. We don't see the people. And that's the analogy of what trauma-informed care means. We can look at the depths of why people act the way they can. We can give them healing opportunities. So we are the first data-driven, trauma-informed, person-centered, homeless reentry program in existence. We've created a data-driven best practice for homeless reentry. That's gaining recognition on a national level. Right now, matter of fact, sometimes we don't know what to do because we're fielding phone calls and we're fielding emails from all over the United States because we believe every person deserves the opportunity to be invested in. The trick to this is compassion with accountability. Those two things can go hand in hand. And we truly believe that we would put a system in place that will allow us to get our businesses back in our communities, to drive in a way that allows us to gather data to solve problems in the community. And my name is Alan Evans.
Oh, Alan, my goodness, thank you. Thank you so much. Wow, what a story. This, you can see where our applause are coming. They're silent because we're all Zoom, but wow. We're going to have questions, I have no doubt. What I'm asking folks to do is if you have a question and you want to come in live, just put your name in the chat. If you want me to read the question, keep it short and I'll read the question. But Gail has a question, and Gail, can you come in? Okay.
I have two things I wanted to ask about. I was there. If a person came into your center, was homeless and single and had no children, but they weren't addicted to drugs or alcohol, had mental health issues, would you be able to help them? Somebody who's just had maybe economic hard times, but they didn't have drug addiction or alcoholism or a mental health issue?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the fastest growing population we see today are senior citizens. People don't realize that. The senior population. And the second fastest growing population is mothers with children. It has nothing, it has to do with the person and their reentry plan.
Okay.
Some people only come in and they only need a few things. Some people come in and they need a lot of stuff. Some people only come in and they need 30, 60 days to get back on their feet and get moved back into the community. I mean, that's the wonderful thing about a data-driven program. But you don't have to qualify by having to be an addict or have mental health issues.
I do have one more. This relates to the addiction portion of the thing. I'm aware that many treatment centers, rehab centers for addicts and all, and I did work briefly in that field many years ago, only really provide our 12-step programs. I mean, the only options, you go to these treatment centers and you have a choice of 12 steps, 12-step from that 12 steps, 12 steps, 12 steps, 12 steps. Do you have any other, your addiction treatment programs, do you do medically assisted, that kind of stuff? Like, let's say for opiate addicts, where you have medication type treatment programs for them? Or are they only allowed to do total sobriety, 12 steps, and nothing but 12 steps? What type of modalities do you have for your addiction treatment for alcoholics? Well, mainly for the drug addicts, but also the alcoholics. Is it only 12 steps, or do you have other kinds of programs?
So we've got several kinds of programs. MAT is something that we're very familiar with. We've got contracts with MAT providers in communities, Suboxone, and the other programs they have in place, but we do require them to have an intense outpatient program along with that Suboxone or what that initial prescription is, because we know the two of them go hand in hand. We do work with, I mean, the one good thing that we learned from COVID is everybody had to go virtual. Medical assistance can be virtual. Treatment programs can be virtual. Groups can be virtual. So we have different vast arrays of opportunities for people that have addiction issues or mental health issues in their life because, excuse me, we work with MAT. You know, our goal is to bring the best resources to a person rather than send a person out to 7 different spots to get resources. And we're very good at that. We've got 20 years experience.
We have a question from Friendly House. Dave, can you bring the next person on?
Yeah, I have two questions. The building you recently created in Portland, I'm just curious about it. Where exactly is it? I'd like to drive by and see it.
And the one in Portland, you could Google Bybee. I don't have the address per se. It's Bybee Lakes Court, 14355, I believe it is, but I might be wrong. It's called the Bybee Lakes. It was at the old Wapato jail. You can come by. We suggest you make an appointment for a tour, and my email address will be in here. So people can come in and tour. We don't just let people go walking back into the shelter per se, but we would love to give you a tour.
Okay, thank you. One other question. As everybody here, we drive around and we see amazing numbers of homeless people. And I keep thinking, what little thing can I do? I'm not a billionaire or a millionaire, but one idea I've had, and I wonder what you think about it. I haven't tried it yet. Just stop by. I have a pickup truck. Stop by and ask these guys, can I haul your trash away for you? Would that help? What do you think of that idea?
Well, I think whatever our heart leads us to do at times, sometimes it's simple, something small. Hauling trash away is not a bad idea. You know, anytime that you can get connected because you see that there's a problem is always part of the solution. I think whatever, I mean, at the end of the day, if you're interested in volunteering, we've got volunteer training at our facility and you can come in and be a part of that as well. But you just find something that your heart says do.
Okay, yeah, the volunteer training information is on your website, I presume.
Absolutely, yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see. Gotta make sure I'm in the right place here. Leslie has a question. Has everything remained nonprofit in your organization? Is everything nonprofit? Absolutely.
Everything is nonprofit. We're a 501c3, and everything is not for profit.
Good. Dave DiNucci, Ann Henderson and Dave have a question from Friendly House.
Hi, I was just taken aback by your story, and thank you for ruining my makeup. But I wanted to let you know that I looked on Google, and it's showing Bybee Lakes Hope Center, which is the one at 14355 North Bybee Lake Boulevard. That's the one.
Yeah.
And it's showing permanently closed. So somebody needs to. I said, they suggested an edit, and I said it's reopened, but
Well, I think the Wapato jail is permanently closed.
yes, but it's showing Bybee Lakes Hope Center.
Yeah, I think they just
permanently
changed the name.
Yeah.
I will. Yeah, we will take a look at that. I don't know why it says that. We're wide open.
Thank you. All right, that's it.
Thanks.
Thanks, Ann. We've got a question from Andrea. I'll read it. I'm so worried about increasing housing costs and how that will drive increasing numbers of folks experiencing homelessness. Is there a catastrophic levels of homelessness on the horizon because of this? What do you anticipate about the next few years?
Well, I mean, there's several different issues that cause homelessness, and there's several different issues that are surrounding affordable housing. The pandemic and the moratorium. You put those things together, and then how many landlords did not get their rent because of the pandemic that was put in place, and then the recovery of those landlords having to figure out ways to recover from that means an increase in affordable housing prices even higher, and the gap gets bigger. It's not a look at the panic. We try not to panic in a situation. We always find solutions on how we can assist, but it doesn't look good. I'll give you that.
We have a question from Sheila at Friendly House. Come on in, Sheila.
Hello. One of the things that I have been reading about forever about the Bybee house place is the transportation problem. And you did mention that you've taken care of it. Can you tell me more about it? Because if I was a homeless person and I was out there and I have no car and the buses, I don't think go out there. Anyway, would you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. Well, the buses didn't go out there before we opened our facility up. But we got together with Metro, and the bus 11 line is less than a block from our facility now. It runs in the mornings and it runs in the afternoons. We have several different private programs that allow transportation and provide from medics to other services that bring a bus directly to our facility and get people back and forth. Plus, they donated a 33-foot bus. Metro did to us. And we're running a program that will have buses running all the time. Transportation really is not an issue. It isn't. We've got bike programs. We've got the ability to get from one location to the other, and people make it work. And we've got great partnerships in the transportation piece. But we've had bus service a block from our facility now since we've opened up our doors. That was the first thing we tackled.
Thank you, Alan. Kathy and Vale have a question. What fraction of people who approach you are not yet prepared to make the personal commitments you require?
So the 65% of people who come into our reentry plan, come into our program. So 100% of the people who come into our emergency shelter, 65% of those people move into the reentry plan, and 35% of them aren't quite ready because they have higher needs than we're going to be capable of offering in that transition. As far as detox goes, and SMI, severe mental illness issues. And then when those people leave and then they come back, another 25% of those people move into our reentry program. So, the wonderful thing about our program is every single person who works one-on-one with anybody who comes through our door have lived experience. And 75% of those people are graduates of our program, of the door that they walked in. So, people want help. Capability is a different thing. It takes a little bit of time. But, the difference is we talk to them in a trauma-informed manner. Instead of saying, what's wrong with you? We say, what's happened to you? Tell us your story. Get that connection. So Right now, there's a couple of pieces we're adding into our program that'll make it a little bit easier, mental health issues, and then making sure people are diagnosed the right way, which is a huge thing, because I was misdiagnosed for my whole life. I was on Thorazine, I was on lithium. I mean, they said I was bipolar and all these things, and the truth was all I had was a broken heart. So.
Okay. Joyce, come on in.
Alan, I am wondering how the people who need you the most are finding out about you. Do you have publicity that goes? I mean, I pass so many homeless camps every day. Do those people even know that you're there? That's my first question. I have a second part.
Yeah, so what we do is we have, we've trained about 80 referring partners, from police departments to fire departments to nonprofits to churches, in a trauma-informed training. So you have to be a referring partner of ours to be able to refer to us. In order to be a referring partner of ours, you have to go through a training that we put in place on trauma-informed care and communication. We've got about 80 agencies in the Portland metro area and about 500 plus people trained in this trauma-informed training. There are people who do know about us, and there are people who don't. But, you know, we are doing our best. We're hiring 2 outreach coordinators that will go into the camps and other places. Yeah, so.
Go ahead with your second question, Joyce.
All right. As much as in fact, I was thinking before you answered the question how much I would like to tour the new facility, because I toured it when it was still set up as a jail, and that was fascinating, but I'd love to see the changes. However, I'm very worried about COVID, and I don't go inside very many places at all. I don't go into restaurants. I go into some stores, but anyway, what should I fear about that, or should I wait until we think COVID is more on the wane?
Well, I can tell you that for the first 15 months that we opened at that facility, we did not have one case of COVID. We do pre-screening for asymptomatic pre-screening opportunities, screening when they get in the door. If we have a person who comes up with some sort of symptoms, we automatically work with the health department to get them into a quarantine unit. But we did get hit with Omicron. When it came through, it kind of swept us. And then we do mass testing on site and vaccinations on site to see if we can assist people in that. We haven't had too many issues at all. I mean, COVID will always be a fear, especially for people that are getting older like us. Well, I might be older, but you know what I mean. And so, you know, that's always going to be a concern. But, you know, if you mask and you social distance, it wouldn't be a problem. Big building's big enough, and, you know.
Susan has a thought. Perhaps HGP members could visit as a group, or keep the group a certain size, maybe more, you know, break up into smaller groups. Is that something that you can make arrangements for? Is that?
We just need a, you know, maybe one person, the president from your group, David, can shoot an email out, and you know, we take groups up to 10, 12 people at a time.
Okay.
And I'm sure that if you kind of do rock, paper, scissors, you can figure out who wants to come out.
That's right. Okay. Thank you. Gail sends a note of thanks, and Jag wants to know, what do you think of Portland's current homeless assistance efforts, like the Safe Rest Villages? And if you don't want this recorded, we can take it out.
I do. The wonderful thing about me is I don't have to have a verbal filter, because I'm not ran by any of that money that comes in a certain direction.
Yeah.
You know, I think the concept of Safe Rest Villages are very, very important. And I'm sure that some of you heard that we were interested in running one of the Safe Rest Villages, and decided that we were going to pull out of it because of the way the ordinance was written up, and then the county's makes nonprofits have to adopt this housing first concept to make it work. I think that the concept is great. I really do. I think the concept is great, but I think that the follow-up and the data collection is broken in our communities.
Yeah.
And those are two things that I personally want to make sure that we could sit at the table and have conversations about, because if we want to solve this problem, we have to know what we're talking about. The way data is being collected right now is insufficient for the changes that we need to make. But bridge housing is really important. Bridge shelters are really, really important. And if we want to get to the place where we want to get our businesses back in communities and people want to come to our town there and shop and enjoy themselves, then we have to make some dramatic changes on how we can offer people alternatives to camping on those streets. And we believe that there's a way to do that. We're just waiting on some other phone calls to get us at that table to talk about it.
Good, wonderful. Yeah, I mean, we don't even know how many homeless people are in our city. I mean, they do this count, but nobody trusts the count. It's kind of, it's very, the data is not there.
It's a point in time count. And so it's only during 1 week, and it's only the people that are reached to get the information from. The numbers have been inadequate and way off base for quite some time. And then they take that information and they send that to the feds and to HUD. And HUD says, okay, your problem got 15% worse this year, so we're going to increase the money that we send to your state because there's a higher rate of homelessness. Then they take that money, they send it to the state, and we spend it the exact same way we always have. And it gets 15% worse a year.
And it's
it's kind of scary.
It is, and nothing's getting better. I mean, and including our reputation.
It's become an industry, homelessness has.
We have a question from Friendly House. Come on in.
Hi, yes, thanks so much, by the way, for this talk. Yeah, I've had my eye on this situation at Wapato for a while, and I've had friends who've been in the homeless advocate area that were just dead set against Wapato. I mean, they just said too far out or too far away from services, can't get to services, institutional setting makes people feel like they're in jail, like we're incarcerating them instead of helping them, et cetera. It sounds like you've addressed quite a lot of that. And I guess my sister has actually been in the homeless shelter area as well in Gresham area, but I mean, helping out at managing. So how much of a dent, in addition to what you've already done, how much of a dent do you think you could make? I mean, is it just that people aren't hearing about you? Are you not quite ready to absorb more? When you are ready, or whatever the issue is, how many more do you think you could take? And if that's nothing compared to the homeless problem in Portland as a whole, what do you think the next steps should be to kind of, move on to the rest of the population that needs help?
So there was a few comments in there and a couple questions, and so I'm going to address all of them. A couple of when people believe that it's too far out, or it's this or it's that, what I usually do is I invite them to go and go camping with me on our streets for a week. Leave your wallet at home. Let's figure out how we're going to get our food. Let's figure out this. And you come and do that. And then you come back to me and you tell me that that warm place to be is anything more than it is. And I say that, and I don't mean that sarcastically, but usually people who have never experienced homelessness have a comment about what they believe the best services are in a community. And so I invite them to go with me. I just throw a backpack and a couple blankets in there and then a cardboard sign, and we just figure out how we're going to eat and how we're going to sleep in the community. Resources are unreachable, even for the people in our community. Has nothing to do with location. And so we haven't had too many issues there. Our projections, not only financial projections, but our projections of how many people will be able to assist when we're at full capacity and we're completely running, is 4,700 people a year. Do we believe we could put a dent in it? Yes, we do. There needs to be more resources than just what it is we offer, and everybody needs to work together in a community. And right now, all the agencies are kind of split up, not wanting to work together because the funding streams keep everybody split up, and everybody's competing for the same pots of money. It's bad. But we believe that there's progress to be made. We believe that best practice for homeless reentry needs to be established in communities, needs to be researched, and then we believe we can make a difference. But 4,700 people a year is a pretty good stint if you follow the numbers that they have in place right now, which we believe is about a third of the actual numbers. But that's kind of the roundabout answer to that. Our financial projections show that if 65% of the people who come, so we have 4,700 plus people doing intakes a year at that facility. 65% of them move from emergency shelter into reentry to reenter back and then come back. So we're looking at about 65% of 4,700 having a true chance at reentry. Is not a bad number for this community, but we're already being asked if we would expand our services in the Portland metro area.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. And we've got a comment from Andrea. I'm wondering how a federally qualified healthcare center, predominantly no-income patients, could connect with your organization to establish a referral relationship.
Well, we're working with OHSU Family Practice, and we've got a full medical wing with a dental suite on site, and we're already, working those details out as we speak right now. And every single person, we were able to take this data. It showed 17% of people come to our door do not have health insurance or even access to it because they're not being connected to the updated version every time that they're supposed to. They got to come back in and sign up again for another year, and they get lost in there. We took that information, we went to Oregon Health Authority, and we said, here's the data. This is how many people need our assistance. This is what we know. They gave us money to certify our staff to become assisters to get people on health care. So now if you come into our door, you say, I don't have health care. It spits a referral out. The next morning, you're met at the door at 8 o'clock in the morning. You have health insurance the next day. So that health insurance piece is really cool because then our clinic that we have on site takes OHP. And so they can get the resources and they can utilize the health insurance model.
We're running a little late, but I am going to, as an MC, I'm just going to ask a question that I'm holding. The policeman that didn't put you in jail, or the policeman in Seaside, that's bona fide community policing. Those guys are wonderful, and that's justice.
That's right.
Why did they do that? Why didn't they just throw you in jail? Why?
Well, I think everybody cares, and some people care a little bit more than the concern about doing their job. Yeah. I spent a majority of my life behind bars in multiple states.
Sure.
But he took the time to learn, and he's one of my best friends today. He was the best man at my wedding. And then one of the other, police officers, Jason Shermerhorn, who's now the Cannon Beach police chief. We hang out all the time, and he's been on my board for 17 years. District attorneys, our board of directors, 40% of the people on our board of directors are law enforcement today. So anytime we could teach people, but the truth is the police departments don't have the ability anymore for accountability. It's really tough to care. It's a scary place for them to be.
Yes.
Yeah.